In case you hadn't realized, it has somehow become uncool to sound like you know what you're talking about or believe strongly in what you're, like, saying. Invisible question marks and parenthetical you knows and you know what I'm sayings have been attaching themselves to the ends of our sentences, even when those sentences aren't, like, questions.
Welcome back to our conversation on alcohol with Jillian and Wright. Hope you enjoy.
Everybody's kind of wanting to numb out.
Well, would it be right to say that it's like a temporary relief,
Yeah.
from something that's happening in your life that you possibly can't deal with or don't know how to at the moment? It's almost like a way of running away or escaping
Yeah.
from it for a while. We know that it will be there when we
Well,
wake
and I
up.
think that I would say actually the person who is doing it even just weekend wise, like certainly in some of environments and communities, I see that there's a pattern even in the community. All the people know each other as the partiers or the drinking crowd, right?
Mhm.
And they find each other and it's a weekend event. Some of the old days, even sports was a place where people sometimes would, right after a game, everybody goes out to drink, right?
Yeah, or before.
Um, yeah, or before, exactly. So but in that numbing out of all those feelings, if we've got a lot of thinking in our minds is very stressful thinking, thoughts of I'm not succeeding, I'm not doing good, why can't I get out of this mess? Why can't I get out of this family or this relationship? We start to feel kind of hopeless. And that's when I think the alcohol becomes even larger. And even when people say, oh, no, no, I'm fine, I'm happy with this, it's really blinding to them at some point. Like it's kind of like you were saying, they see it, but I actually experience that a lot of people don't see the impact of the alcohol, even on their own bodies, to their family. It just makes you pull away. So if you're that numb, you're not that interested in anybody else anymore.
I noticed that you just said the body, and that's one of the things that I wanted to touch on too. And I know oftentimes when we think about alcohol, we're not thinking about health. I
No.
mean, right, in the long term, we're not thinking about health. And one of those studies that's finally come out, and Canada has finally said this is the facts behind it, is that all alcohol is carcinogenic or is
Mhm.
cancer causing, cancer contributing, and that it doesn't matter what amount, that's what it is. And but nobody's really walking into it thinking, okay, I'm taking a sip of cancer.
Yeah.
Like, that's not what you're thinking, right? You're thinking,
Yeah.
okay, in doses, and I'm going to be very responsible with my alcohol use tonight. I'm not going to drink and drive. But nobody's thinking about long-term health causes. And considering that this is just basically recent, where the medical association has said this, just think about how many times or how much people have consumed, not really knowing. And so what's your take on that? Like about that approach. Do you think that that approach might limit people's consumption in excess? We're talking of alcohol, or do you think that usually once you are struggling with it, you're struggling with it regardless, like cigarettes or any other
Yeah.
addiction?
Already using a lot or in the medium levels or
Oh, just a lot, like
yeah, a lot.
just in
So no, I
total.
don't think I don't think anyone considers their own value, their own sense of worthiness in their bodies, their health, when they have gotten to the point that they're using the use of alcohol is now taken over and it is no longer a concern to that person while they're in the influence of it over and over again. Everything that's rational about it's not, safe for you anymore. You're going to drive and drink. You're going to maybe become very aggressive or depressed and want to take your life, to aggressive with your family members. When it gets to that part for somebody in their life, other and outside and themselves are no longer the first thing they think about. They only think about the feeling of the withdrawal, the sitting away from life. So even telling them it's not until they go to, let's say an individual chooses to go to treatment, they'll hear those new statistics, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're ready maybe to hear those kinds of messages,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And they have to work hard at it because there's a lot of things we've done through our alcohol, and AA, really invites people to look at that
Mm.
of, making their amends, doing certain things. And that's a, really changing your life,
I
right?
if I were to fraction out how many, especially because I deal with men, how many male identifying figures walk into my
Mm.
office or walk into the building, and I hear we like to listen to their stories. It's important that everybody has agency and that they're able to tell their story as to why we're here, especially those that have been sent, to us because of whether it be domestic violence or any other situation. I find that a lot of the bad decisions are either blamed or associated. Uh, the starting point is alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
I got drunk one night, or I had too much one night, and it led to, and then XYZ. Whether it was just the alcohol or it led to drug use or whatever, and then the decision was made, or uh, or they did something that was something that they're ashamed of. And if you were to, not percentage wise, but do
Mm.
you see it as a contributing factor to many of the decisions, bad decisions that has been made, or do you think that there was underlying issues and then the alcohol did not help with those decisions? Because I'll leave it at that, and then I'll ask you the reasons
Yeah.
why. Yeah.
So I would say both,
Okay.
both. I think that some people, become influenced by alcohol. Like I said, very early, they grow up with alcoholic family members. They're given alcohol at a young age.
Mm,
And so their addiction process, is can be very specific to that social early experience,
mm,
right? Then there's others that might not have started that way at all, but through their life circumstances, different ones, even losing your dearest partner at 40 years old, and you
mm,
haven't really had a drinking problem. Yet the grief, the sadness, the pain, is kind of numbing out all that.
mm,
Um, and so we could call that a trauma event even, sometimes death is taken in as a trauma.
mhm,
Um, so in that way, then the person is, I have definitely seen the spectrum of that. What I would say is it doesn't, when people are trying to change their lives or work with shifting the alcohol use in their life, I think what's the biggest and the hardest first step is for that person to acknowledge that whatever actions they do while they're under the substance, is even sitting in their chair and just falling to sleep and passing out and not going to work and being
mhm,
late for work, is going to affect their health, their social family well-being, their well-being, because the alcohol has taken, and that's why they'll often say, well, it was that alcohol that made me do this.
mm,
um, and no, the alcohol affected your brain enough to remove the usual barriers you might have used to tell yourself that's not a good thing to do,
mm,
to drive my car right now.
mm, mhm,
So we say, most of us feel like while I'm under a use of something, we'll say it's the substance. Yes, the substance contributed, but the person themselves has to look at, and that's, I think, often what people will call it, sometimes the old days is dry drunks,
mm,
where they've stopped drinking, but all that other disturbances and behaviors were actually signs of other things, like their own abuse in childhood or uh, anger and rage issues from other places.